In the quiet of her presence, something ancient stirs in him. It's not lust, nor is it love in the romantic sense, but reverence. She says nothing extraordinary. She makes no effort to impress. Yet there is a calm gravity about her that unsettles. The noise in his mind. Carl Jung once spoke of the anima, soul image of woman in the psyche of man. This isn't just poetry. This is the architecture of how men respond to feminine mystery, the kind that doesn't seek attention, but commands it with silence. There is a woman who walks into a room, and suddenly the atmosphere shifts not because of her beauty, but because of something deeper. She is not loud, not attention-seeking, but every eye, especially his, turns toward her. She seems untouched by the chaos around her. She carries the storm and the stillness, both in her breath. And he doesn't know why he feels so compelled to look, to listen, to understand. But he does. It's as if he's remembering something he's never known. She doesn't explain herself. She doesn't reveal all. And yet, the less she shows, the more he wants to know. In that moment, she becomes not a puzzle to solve, but a presence to behold. This is not the kind of power that wears armor. It wears softness like a blade. It does not need validation or conquest. It waits. And the man, conditioned to chase, to conquer, to break down and categorize, suddenly finds himself disarmed. He wants to worship, but he doesn't even know what he's bowing to. All he knows is that in front of this quiet, mysterious power, something in him wants to become more, wants to rise, to be worthy. This is the spiritual pull Carl Jung alluded to. Not dominance, not seduction, but the alchemical force of mystery held in balance with presence. And yet, this kind of woman isn't born out of charm. She is forged in solitude. She has walked through heartbreak without bitterness. She has watched men leave and didn't shrink. She's been silenced and doubted and still chose not to scream. Her silence is not empty. It is full of what she endured and did not allow to harden her. Her eyes do not plead. They invite. Her hands do not reach. They wait. She doesn't need you, but if you are wise, you will see that being in her orbit is a privilege, not a right. A man may chase 100 women, but when he meets one like this, everything inside him stills. Because she is not a mirror reflecting his ego, she is a mirror reflecting his inadequacy and his longing, and that is terrifying. She won't chase him, she won't flatter him, but she will awaken him. And awakening is not comfortable. It burns. She makes him see all the parts of himself he buried, the fear of being vulnerable, the hunger for maternal comfort, the ache for soulful connection. He doesn't know if he wants to possess her or become more like her. But either way, he cannot. Look away, because something in her rhythm, her restraint, her refusal to play emotional games feels holy. It makes the chaos in him pause. It makes him consider that perhaps what he thought he wanted, a woman who responds, entertains, forgives. Everything is not what his soul truly seeks. No, what he truly longs for is the woman who does not ask him to perform, but simply demands that he be real. And that kind of demand, spoken without a word, is the highest kind of power a woman can hold. That's why she doesn't need to shout to be heard. Her silence echoes louder than 1,000 voices. She doesn't move fast. She doesn't need to. The man finds himself slowing down just to be near her. In a world full of reaction, she becomes the pause. In a world full of performance, she becomes the truth. And while other women may fight to be chosen, she waits for the one who sees her not with eyes, but with spirit, because only a man who has met his own soul can meet hers. And that's what makes her magnetic. Not her body, not her voice, not even her kindness, but her alignment. She lives in alignment with who she truly is, and that is what undoes him. In her presence, He feels the tension between the man he pretends to be and the man he could become. And so, she doesn't ask for devotion. He offers it freely. Not because he is weak, but because something sacred in him is responding to something sacred in her. You see? In the eyes of a woman who knows herself, a man sees more than her. He sees his own yearning for depth, for meaning, for truth. That's why the feminine, in its truest form, doesn't seduce, it awakens. It doesn't manipulate, it mirrors. And for the man who is ready, that awakening becomes a transformation. It becomes a form of worship, not of her, but of what she awakens in him. Because real, feminine power doesn't make a man feel small. It makes him remember who he really is beneath the noise. So when you wonder what draws him in, no, it's not your laughter, though he loves it. It's not your body, though he desires it. It's the mystery you carry, the silence you hold, the grace you move with, the storm you no longer apologize for. You've become more than a woman, more than a lover. You've become a threshold, and he doesn't know whether to cross it or kneel before it. But he knows this much: he can never unsee you again, and that is the power he cannot touch, but will always feel. There are moments in a man's life when everything around him feels familiar, yet unsettlingly hollow. He might sit at the head of a dinner table surrounded by people, or lie beside someone he's known for years, and still feel like a stranger in a room full of mirrors that refuse to reflect him. And then one day, she appears not with fireworks or declarations, but with silence. Her eyes, not loud with seduction or need, but calm like a still lake that seems to know every storm he's hidden. She walks past him, not to catch his attention, but because her path demands no justification. And yet, he feels something turn, not in her, but in himself. It is the first sign that the feminine mystery, when lived fully and unapologetically, acts, not as a performance, but a mirror. And not just any mirror, but the one he never knew he needed. A mirror that doesn't flatter. It reveals. When she listens, it's not with nods or performative sympathy. It's a silence that swallows every word he says and allows it to echo back into his own ears, reshaped. He finds himself speaking things he didn't know were in him. His past, his fears, his ambitions spilling out, not because she asked, but because her very presence is like a question he's been dying to answer. She doesn't react dramatically. She doesn't fix. She just holds the space, the silence. The emotional frequency, where truth doesn't need applause. This is the silent power Carl Jung spoke of when he explored the concept of the anima, feminine part of the male psyche. It doesn't shout, it doesn't demand, but it haunts, in the best way. He starts noticing that around her, his usual games have no weight. His rehearsed charm, his flirtatious confidence, useless. Not because she's immune to affection, but because her energy doesn't play in those dimensions. She is rooted, deep in herself. She can laugh and flirt and even desire, but she never detaches from her own center, and that throws him off. He's used to control. He's used to being the sun around which others orbit. But she is the moon. She pulls, not pushes. She influences tides without ever touching the ocean floor. And for the first time in years, he is no longer the one being watched. He is the one watching. But watching her doesn't give him ownership. It gives him revelation. The kind of revelation that makes him question why he ever needed ownership. In the first place, her elegance isn't something he can grasp. It's something he has to surrender to. And this challenges everything he's been taught about masculinity. That power means possession. That love means conquering. That intimacy means constant access. She doesn't give constant access. She gives presence. And then she retreats. Not out of cruelty or confusion, but because she understands the rhythm of self-respect. She knows how to protect her inner world. And this makes him ache in ways he cannot explain. He begins to wonder, why do I feel more myself in her absence than I ever did in someone else's presence? This is the paradox of the awakened feminine. She doesn't fill your voids. She shows you where they are. She doesn't complete you. She awakens the parts of you you've long abandoned. And this is precisely why the silence around her is so loud, because it's not just her silence, sits his inner world now shouting to be seen. Every memory, every repressed emotion, every dream he buried to fit in, or to impress others, or to play it safe, she stirs it all without lifting a finger. He notices he's changing. He's slower now, more thoughtful. The way he responds to people, the way he reacts to challenges. It's as if her energy planted a seed that now grows vines through his ribcage, demanding he feel deeper. He stops needing validation from others, not because she told him to, but because her mere presence reminds him that he already has worth, that he doesn't need to prove anything, that a man is not truly powerful when he dominates others, but when he masters his inner world, and for that, she becomes his muse, not in the romanticized sense of fantasy, but in the psychological sense of transformation. And yet, she's not always there. In fact, sometimes she's miles away emotionally or physically, but her impact lingers. Like incense after a prayer, like the echo of a drum long after it stops beating. This is the nature of her magic. She doesn't possess. She penetrates, not in a physical sense, but in a soul sense. Her presence slices through his distractions. Her energy bypasses his ego. And what's left behind is not the man he pretended to be, but the one he was always meant to become. She never once tells him to change. She never lectures him on being more aware, more sensitive, or more authentic. She just is. And in her being, he finds his own unbecoming. The masks start slipping. The walls start softening. He cries more. Not because she makes him weak, but because she allows him to be honest. And honesty is the birthplace of strength. He realizes. Now that she was never trying to be mysterious to confuse him, she was just unwilling to dilute herself for comprehension. And that kind of integrity can either inspire you, for him, it does both. This silent pull, this quiet transformation, it's not something he shares with anyone. He wouldn't know how. It would sound like a riddle to those who haven't met someone like her. But it lives in him now. It's her influence, her imprint, her sacred rebellion against superficiality. Every time he meets someone new, he measures them unintentionally against the stillness she carried, the depths she offered, the emotional maturity she held, and most fall short. Not because they aren't good enough, but because she awakened a standard in him that he didn't know existed. A standard not of appearance, but of essence. In his loneliest nights, he remembers her, not as a lost love, but as a mirror. A mirror he can no longer turn away from. He's not sure he'll ever meet someone like her again. Maybe he wasn't supposed to. Maybe she came not to stay, but to show, to remind, to disturb, to whisper in his soul's ear, "You are more than what you've settled for." And then she vanished not out of abandonment, but because her purpose was fulfilled. She didn't belong to him. She belonged to truth, and truth never stays where lies are comfortable. What she gave him can't be returned. It can only be honored in how he walks now, in how he speaks, in how he loves. He's quieter, not because he's broken, but because silence, he learned from her, holds more power than noise. And the man he is now, he's still becoming, still unfolding. But for the first time, he's doing it not to impress the world, but to finally meet himself. There comes a moment in a man's life when he is no longer chasing. He is watching. No longer pursuing the loud, the obvious, the performative. Instead, he becomes transfixed by something still, something echoing with ancient quiet. That stillness is often a woman who doesn't need to be seen to feel her worth. She doesn't step into rooms to capture attention. She steps into herself, and the room rearranges its energy. She's not a performance, she's a presence. And to a man who's used to flash, the mystery of her silence becomes a sacred mirror. He begins to see himself not as he pretends to be, but as he truly is in her eyes. And that reflection isn't always flattering. The woman who carries silent power doesn't need to scold or tie. She reveals. She shows him what he hides from himself, and for the first time, he feels both shame and awe. He's not used to women like her women, who awaken not his lust, but his reverence. Her boundaries aren't walls, they're temples. She doesn't push him away. She simply stands in who she is, and if that makes him feel unworthy, that's not her burden. He realizes her power was never in her voice, but in what she doesn't say. She doesn't plead for his presence. She doesn't explain why she walked away. She doesn't dramatize her value. She simply exists in it. And that, strangely, becomes the greatest sermon he's ever heard. He finds himself questioning the way he's lived, the roles he's played, the women he's chased. None of them asked him to rise, but she does not with words, but with grace. And suddenly, all the ways he's played it safe begin to burn. He wants to be more, not to impress her, but to deserve the way she once looked at him when he didn't even know she was watching. Men often hide behind distractions, careers, conquests, ego boosts, applause. But a woman who is whole in herself, who doesn't flinch when he falters and masks him. He can't charm his way into her world. He can only earn his place through growth. She may never ask him for change, but something in her presence requires it. And if he doesn't rise, he loses her. Not to another man, but to her path. She keeps walking. She keeps evolving. She keeps becoming, while he stays still, haunted by the echo of her absence. That is when reverence turns into worship. The kind of worship that places her above him, but the kind that reveals how far he must travel inward, just to stand beside her. And this is the paradox he now lives in, caught between desire and devotion. He doesn't just want her body. He wants her silence, her gaze, her restraint, her fire that never needed to be flaunted. He begins to remember the moments she didn't speak, but he felt everything shift. How she could dissolve a room's chaos just by entering it. How her calm made his noise unbearable. That's what stays with him. Not her beauty, not her laughter, but the way she carried storms in her stillness. And now she's not here. She's gone not because he failed, but because he remained ordinary in the presence of the sacred. She wasn't asking for perfection. She was waiting for presence, and he mistook her patience for permanence. Now he walks through life with a quiet ache, a longing that doesn't shout, but hums. He sees her everywhere, not in faces, but in silences, in the still moments between thoughts, in the women who tried too hard, in the spaces where love once breathed. He remembers how she didn't try at all. She simply was. And that truth devastates him more than any goodbye, because it wasn't rejection, it was revelation. She didn't leave because he was flawed. She left because he refused to evolve. And now he sits with that truth, not in shame, but in yearning. He wants to become the man she believed he could be. Even if she never returns, even if he worships her only in memory, because she was never a woman to possess. She was the mirror. He was never ready to face on the silence he will never forget. Asterisk, the deep woman is not born in comfort. She is carved by shadows, shaped in silence, and baptized by the betrayals that would have broken someone less rooted. She is not strong in the way people misuse the word, performing resilience, while secretly aching. No, her strength is cellular. It lives in the marrow of her mystery. She doesn't wear her wounds on her sleeve. She lets them become her. Architecture. She has cried oceans in solitude and emerged with eyes that don't beg, they behold. And this, more than anything, is what men are unprepared for. Not the beauty, not the softness, but the still haunting knowing in her gaze, the one that sees who they are beneath the armor, beneath the charm, beneath the roles they perform for the world. Ah, man who is used to being adored for what he projects will always feel unsettled around a woman who sees what he protects. He might try to impress her. He might lead with what he owns, who he knows, how loudly the world applauds him. But her soul doesn't respond to volume. It responds to vibration. And if his depth doesn't match hers, she'll smile kindly, ... and disappear. Not to punish, but to preserve. Because the deep woman has learned often through grief that shrinking for someone else's comfort is a slow death. So now she lives as she is, and only those who can breathe in deep waters will find her waiting. She doesn't need a savior. She became her own. She doesn't seek a crown. She carries her own kingdom. She doesn't beg to be chosen because she already chose herself. And that is what shakes the ground for the kind of man who only understands women who compete for his attention. He meets her and realizes he is not the prize. She is, and not because she tries to be. But because she doesn't, her worth is not a currency he can manipulate. It is a frequency he must rise to match. And this is where his soul begins to tremble. Because to walk beside her, he must die to who he has been. Not because she demands it, but because her presence makes anything less than truth unbearable. She doesn't speak often, but when she does, her words carry the weight of lifetimes. She doesn't react quickly, but when she moves, it's tectonic. She doesn't fall in love with potential. She reads the soul behind the promise. And if what she sees doesn't align with who he claims to be, she won't argue, she'll vanish. Not out of cruelty, but because the deep woman knows her peace is not negotiable. She's built it with too many shattered pieces. She's learned that being alone in her truth is more nourishing than being with someone who fears it. And that alone makes her terrifying. Not because she is cold, but because she is warm without being needy, open without being naive, loving without being lost. She wants love, but only the kind that deepens her. She wants partnership, but not if it costs her clarity. She wants to be met, not managed, cherished, not consumed. And when a man cannot offer these, he may still crave her, but he will never hold her, because she cannot be kept tonally honored. She cannot be convinced tonally matched. And he begins to realize something he never did with other women, that he must become worthy, not just willing. That this isn't a game, that this is a gate and only those with sacred intent may pass. He will feel it the day she walks away. The shift in the air, the silence that sings, the echo of what he almost had but didn't know how to hold. And if he is honest, he will remember that she didn't ask for much. She asked for presence, for truth, for depth. And what terrified him most wasn't that he couldn't give it, but that he didn't yet know how. Because the deep woman doesn't teach by lecturing, she teaches by existing. And being around her feels like standing at the edge of something ancient, something holy. Not because she wants to be worshipped, but because her soul remembers every lifetime she stayed silent, every life she betrayed herself to keep the peace, every version of her that settled. Now she refuses. She chooses herself again and again and again. And in doing so, she becomes the mirror of a man's awakening. She is not his destination. She is the invitation to his own depth. And if he cannot answer that call, she blesses him from afar and disappears into the mystery she came from. A mystery that is not meant to be solved, only surrendered to. Asterisk, he didn't understand it then. Not fully, not the weight of her restraint. Not the way she held back storms that could have shattered him. not the grace it took to stay when she was misunderstood, unseen, or half-loved. But now, in the long silence after her, he hears it all. Every unspoken plea, every quiet heartbreak, every moment she chose dignity over drama. She had so many chances to break him, to make him feel the void he was creating, but she didn't. Instead, she gave him space. The very thing he thought he wanted until it became a wilderness. That's the cruelty of hindsight, turns her silence into thunder. And now, even the air feels heavy with her absence. There's no one to blame. She didn't leave to punish. She left because staying meant betraying herself. And in doing so, she taught him the language of true love, not control, not possession, but the ability to walk away without anger, without noise, without begging to be seen. The truth is, men like him don't realize what they have until it no longer softens their edges. She used to be the place where his chaos landed safely, where his sharpness dulled, where his tired ambition found warmth. But now, he walks through women like smoke, hoping one of them might carry her echo. None do. They laugh louder, try harder, give faster, but they don't make him still. They don't make him feel like he's been seen through and still chosen. That was her gift, the way she saw through his ego and loved what he tried to hide. He remembers how she'd tilt her head when he lied, not to catch him, but to wonder why he needed to pretend. She wasn't interested in masks. She wanted the man beneath them. And when he refused to come forward, she didn't argue. She simply disappeared. Not out of spite, but out of reverence for what love is supposed to feel like. And this is the wound he carries now, not just that he lost her, but that he never fully showed up when she still believed in him. He told himself he had time, that she wasn't going anywhere, that love like hers doesn't leave. But he forgot, deep women don't leave like others. They don't slam doors or burn bridges. They simply rise, quietly, slowly, permanently. By the time you feel their absence, they've already healed. And no amount of begging will reopen what took her years to close. She didn't need revenge. Her growth was enough. And now he sits in the ruins of the comfort she once gave so free, line onto memories that feel more alive than the present. She was the lesson no one taught him, the one no man warned him about. Not the heartbreak, but the haunting. The way she would remain in every woman who couldn't hold a candle to her. The way her voice would echo in empty apartments. The way her softness became a standard nothing else could reach. He understands now. She was never asking him to be perfect. She just needed him to be present, to meet her in the raw places, to stop hiding behind indifference and face her with a heart that wasn't afraid to break. But he couldn't. Not then. He was too busy protecting the parts of himself that love needed to reach. And now, all he has is the fire she lit in him that refuses to go out, even when she's long gone. Because some women don't just love, they awaken. And once you've been awakened by a woman like her, you can't go back to sleep. You try. You distract, you replace. But deep down, you know, it wasn't just love you lost. It was the version of you that only she could see. The one you still haven't become. And so, she lives on, not in your bed, not in your arms, but in your becoming. In the man you now fight to be. Not for her return, but for your redemption. Because even if you never touch her again, you want to become the man who could have deserved her. And in that way, she remains eternal, untouchable, unforgettable. The fire you didn't feed, now the one that feeds you. He used to think love was about holding on, gripping tighter when it slips, fighting harder when it fades. But she showed him something else entirely. She showed him that real love sometimes means letting go with grace, with silence, with the strength to walk away before it rots into resentment. She didn't slam doors. She didn't scream. She just became someone he could no longer reach. That's what happens when a woman outgrows her own patience. She doesn't leave to escape him. She leaves to meet herself fully. And now he finally sees it. She didn't leave him. She returned to the version of herself he kept asking her to dim. In that version, she's radiant. He tried to chase her, not physically, emotionally, spiritually, through the eyes of other women, through late-night apologies that came too late, through the memory of how she used to look at him when she still believed he was capable of rising with her. But nothing brought her back, because she wasn't a woman you chase. She was a mirror, one that revealed who he was and who he refused to become. And now he lives with the ache of watching her light the path ahead without him. She elevated, and he stayed still, hoping she'd come back for him. But deep women don't come back. Not because they hate you, but because they finally love themselves more than the potential of who you could have been. There is no villain here, just misalignment. Just a woman who reached her depth before he reached his courage. And that's the tragedy. Not the end, but the timing. He needed more time to understand her, to understand himself, to unlearn the walls he called strength. But time ran out. And now she belongs to a realm of women who love deeply, but never foolishly. Who give second chances to the right effort, not the right words. Who carry silence like a weapon and walk away without turning into stone. She's not bitter, she's not broken, she's just beyond him now. And perhaps that's the most painful form of loss. The one you know was your fault entirely. Still, in the quiet of his nights, he thanks her. Not because he got to keep her, but because he got to witness her. To know, even briefly, what it feels like to be loved by someone sacred. Someone who asked him to rise not for her approval, but because she saw the greatness he was hiding behind fear. And though he failed to rise then, her memory became the reason he began to rise now. That's the cruel kindness of deep love. It doesn't just leave, it transforms. It burns everything false and leaves you staring at your own reflection, asking yourself why you never became the man she already believed you could be. And so, she lives on not as a wound, but as a compass. She became his silent mentor, his unanswered prayer, his ache that became art. And no matter how many years pass, no matter how far she goes, he knows one thing will always be true. She didn't leave to hurt him. She left to save herself. And, in doing so, she saved him too. Not in the way he wanted, but in the way he needed. Because some women don't just exit your life, they rewrite the story of it, quietly, completely, eternally. And she was that woman.